19 years I've been at this job. I've seen human beings killed at the hands of others in every way imaginable. You name it, I've seen it. Shootings, stabbings, drownings, suffocatings, blown apart by cars, some DUI manslaughter cases, horrible things. This is the worst case I have ever seen as far as the facts go. The way that Miss Barron died was horrific. Little Ronnie, she couldn't scream, she couldn't run away, and she witnessed what you did to her mother as far as shooting her mother in the arm with the gunshot. She knew. And the horror that that child suffered. And she already had a life where she was born with challenges regarding her physical and her mental disabilities. But the pain and suffering that she suffered that night at your hands, unspeakable, absolutely unspeakable. And at the moment, that first time you struck her with that hatchet, and little Ronnie testified that all he could see was tears coming out of his sister's face. At that moment, that child knew she was being betrayed in the cruelest, most tragic and sorrowful way that a child could ever be betrayed. She was being betrayed by her parent, the one person that should be there to protect their children and love them and keep them from harm. And that was the last thing that child felt before she passed on from this earth, was your utter, cruel betrayal to her. And I read somewhere, and I don't know if it's true or not, I have no idea, but I read somewhere that souls pick their lives, and that they know exactly how difficult their lives are going to be before they enter into this world. And I don't know if that's true or not, but if it is, Ronnie O'Neill is one of the bravest souls I have ever come across in my 54 years on this planet. One of the bravest ever, because she suffered so traumatically.
This is literally a life contract. This is the plan that you've made for your current life before incarnation. Okay, so this really, the meaning of soul contract in this context means that before you incarnated, there was sort of what's known as a conference. And so your soul came together with other souls, with guides, with spirit guides, and you came together and you formulated a plan for your life before incarnating into it.
Hello, loves. Today I'm going to be finally talking about the soul contract. And I'm using Christina Lope's video about soul contracts because I think that she gives some good explanations, and I agree with some of the things she says and not all of them. My interpretation of what a soul contract is we're in heaven and we can be with a group of souls that we know and tend to incarnate with on a regular basis or something, and we decide different things we want to go through, and then we become born or incarnate. We choose our parents, we do all that, and then we incarnate and live out those things that we decided to go through, but we forget them.
Okay, and that plan included some major life experiences that you wanted to go through. It included some connections that you wanted to make with other souls, and so you had agreements. You made agreements with those souls before incarnating. Places you were going to live, jobs you were going to have. This is the view of the soul contract from this prism. You can call it sacred contract or life contract also. So this is basically looking at the soul contract as the overall plan that your soul had for this lifetime and that put in motion before you incarnated. Okay, so this is the first understanding of soul contract. I don't tend to use the term soul contract for this particular, to talk about this particular life plan.
I personally am not too keen on soul contracts because it seems a little bit, as I said in a video before, it seems a little bit predestination to me, that it doesn't unfold as things happen. Although I did watch a movie of a very well-renowned medium from Brazil. His name is Chico Xavier, and the movie is based on his experience channeling a deceased person's spiritual life journey. This doctor died, and he told Chico Xavier's his story. It's a little complicated. The movie is based on Chico Xavier's real life experience with the doctor named Andre.
Dona Laura, eu sei que a senhora não precisa mais reencarnar. Então por que voltar a viver na Terra?
Eu pedi e o ministro Clarencio aceitou. É preciso viver de novo para evoluir. Há lições que só a vida na Terra pode nos dar. Além disso, programamos uma vida que tem tudo para dar certo, mas nunca se sabe.
The reason I included this clip from the movie Astral City is because this group of souls incarnate on a regular basis, and the mother of this child wanted to reincarnate in order to help her daughter learn certain lessons. So they go to this opening to cross over from heaven into being reborn. And before they get there, the one woman said, well, it doesn't always pretty much go according to plan. And that's the one thing I can think about with soul contracts that makes sense. It isn't defined and already set in stone that life is like an unfolding process, and we don't know how it's going to go. And it's almost like God doesn't even know how it's going to go, because that's the way that makes life our own choices. We don't, we have to live the results of our choices, the consequences of our actions. And in a way, God knows, because there is no time. And in a way, God doesn't know. And I try to wrap my brain around this idea in my head a lot, but I don't get very far. So if you have some ideas, I would love to hear them.
Mouth shut. Never, ever snitch on yourself. And then I would go to confession in the closet, and the priest would go, Kathleen, have you done anything bad? Is there anything you'd like to tell me about? I'm sorry, Father, but I do not recall, and I need an attorney.
The idea that God doesn't know ultimately the choices that we will make in our lifetime, because if God does know the choices, then we don't have our free will.
Okay, so the second usage of the term soul contracts, and what I use it I use this term for this generally, is what's called contracts with people. Okay, so that's really what the rest of this video is going to be focused on, not really on the whole life plan, but on the contracts that we have with other souls before we incarnate. And so we kind of have this agreement that we're going to cross paths when we're down here.
The idea here is that when we're all together, and I'm just going to call it the before realm, before we get to Earth, we gather together as a group of family members, friends, and we confer on what we want to learn and the things we want to go through as humans. And this is where I kind of get into the quantum spirituality. And when I mean quantum spirituality, I'm kind of talking about the indefinable. So there's the collective consciousness of all of the people on Earth together. Then there's countries. Then there's cities. Then there's towns. And then there's family groups. I'm just reducing everything into a way to talk about it. But there's karmic and life lessons and learning on each of those levels. And so it comes together to create the kind of life that you have chosen, which to me becomes indefinable when you're bringing in all these clusters of factors.
A soul contract is a significant soul evolving connection that I establish with someone down here on earth. Okay, so before I incarnate, I have these agreements with different souls that are going to incarnate around the same time as me, but they don't have to be exactly the same age as me. But before we incarnate, we kind of have this agreement. We establish this agreement that we're going to cross paths down here for various evolutionary reasons. And the soul puts this in place because the soul knows that connections, human to human connections, are the most rich connections when it comes to the evolution of the soul and kind of really the expansion and growth of the soul. So it sets up a lot of these meetings, all right? And when it comes to these kinds of connections, I want to leave a little bit of a side note here, ding, ding. A soul contract in this context means that we can meet for a lifetime or we can meet for just a little while.
In my opinion, Christina is talking primarily about intimate relationships with family members and people that you've had close relationships with, and maybe it goes wrong or it isn't going well, and finding ways to heal that or to disengage. That's my take on what she was doing in her video. However, when I hear this part of what she's saying, it makes me think of all the ways that we can interact on any given day on any soul level. So that's where I come into the quantum spirituality, because there's no way in my mind to set this up. You go to the grocery store and you have an interaction with someone there that you never see again. You only saw them there that one moment, but that would be a soul contract. You would have a soul contract with somebody who, let's say, has road rage on you, or somebody who is a narcissist and does something that feels like your life is ruined. Those would be considered soul contracts too.
Some soul contracts you don't want to have your whole life because you may get stuck in these things, okay? But we're going to talk about that in a little bit. For now, let's just suffice it to say that some soul contracts come into our lives to be lifelong connections, and other contracts are really meant to be temporary for us to clear things up, and then that soul contract disintegrates.
It seems like she's talking here about a soul contract that you would make in the before life time period with another person, where you discussed something that you personally wanted to learn what it felt like. So let's say you get into the relationship with this narcissist because you want to have the experience and feeling of what it's like to be taken advantage of. And that possibly could be done in order for your soul to grow and understand what compassion means. So the whole thing basically was designed, and it seems like she's arguing you can let go of these. You can let go of these soul contract yourself here and now in this lifetime once you believe you got the lesson.
When it comes to soul contracts, there's really three main reasons why the soul loves to establish soul contracts, agreements with other souls to cross paths down here. One of the ways is because it accelerates evolution of the soul. So when we meet face to face down here, connections with humans are the ones that can be, yes, the most challenging for us on many, many ways, but also the most rich connections when it comes to evolution and growth. And the soul, your soul energy is very growth driven. So the soul is always looking for ways to grow, for ways to evolve, for ways to expand its horizons. And so it picks these soul contracts with other souls, and it establishes these agreements as a way to accelerate its evolution and growth. Okay, so that's one way.
I like this idea because I like the idea of spiritual evolution, and that's where I have hope, is that along with the other things that we've evolved throughout history and lifetimes is technology and medicine and all that. But in my mind, it seems like spirituality hasn't evolved in the same way, although it is probably better than some centuries. But I still feel like we have war, we still have animosity, and we don't treasure our children as much as we could, and the next generation has to suffer the consequences of the investments we make or don't make. So if soul contracts creates a way for us to collectively evolve to, you can sign me up on that contract.
One reason why the soul establishes soul contracts. The second reason is to help with healing. This is really important. Okay, so sometimes the soul will use soul contracts, these agreements with other souls, as a way to help heal things that were left unhealed from a past life. Okay, so let's say in a past life you exited with a major wound. Let's say you were heartbroken and you just weren't able to heal it in that past life. You died, you went back to the spirit realm, and so the soul is always looking to clear up unfinished business, and so it can establish a soul contract with another soul down here that'll help heal that heartbreak in this lifetime.
Like, yeah, that
Okay,
makes
so-
sense, because I was energetically bound to my mom basically through emotions, which are energy. I didn't really want to give that up yet. I had learned that this is weird, but in another life, my mom was my husband and I was her wife. So, and like, it's interesting how we keep interacting with these souls in each life. But
Gally just shared her near-death experience she had when she was a child, and the spirit guides had asked her if she wanted to go back or stay there, and she responded. She was probably about 8 or 10 when she passed away and came back. She shared that she couldn't leave yet because she had this connection with her mother and she wanted to stay with that connection that she had. And so she returned and was able to share all the things that she had learned about her life and her lifetimes through her soul journey.
And the third major reason why the soul chooses to establish soul contracts is to complete karmic cycles. This is really common also. So let's say that you've spent lifetime after lifetime kind of in karmic loops where you do something and then you receive it. And when you do something to someone else and then that person does something to you. These are called karmic loops. And it's karma just means action and reaction. So in some lifetimes, let's give a concrete example. Let's say you killed someone and then you were killed by someone, or you were violent to someone and then someone was violent to you. This creates a karmic loop that can continue to perpetuate until the karmic loop is broken.
19 years I've been at this job. I've seen human beings killed at the hands of others in every way imaginable. You name it, I've seen it. Shootings, stabbings, drownings, suffocatings, blown apart by cars, some DUI manslaughter cases, horrible things. This is the worst case I have ever seen as far as the facts go.
This is Judge Michelle Cisco, and she saw the trial of Ronnie O'Neill, who brutally killed his ex-girlfriend and his autistic daughter and tried to kill his son as well, which both children were biologically his children with his ex-girlfriend. And the son lived and was able to identify him and everything that happened. He was about 8 years old. It's just a terribly heart-wrenching, painful thing that happened. And According to the soul contract, it would be in the before life, Ronnie and Kenyatta would be sitting there discussing the different things that they would want to experience and go through on Earth. And then they made this contract. They decided to do that. They were both born, and then they met up, and then they played out this scenario where he killed his ex-girlfriend in this terrible manner. That's what a soul contract means. And I remember reading Neil Donald Walsh's book, Conversations with God. And I believe it's in the middle book where he talked about how people who make, it's sort of along the lines of soul contract, but people who make these agreements in a way that the person who has chosen to be the bad side of it, like the one that does the harm, psychologically in some ways in their soul, has more issues, or there's more pain because everybody looks at him or her in such a horrible way. How could you do these horrible things? So that's kind of what a soul contract would be on that level. And Christina says there would be a cycle of that would just happen and happen and happen until somebody steps out of it. And I remember hearing a Buddhist nun at her talk one time. She just talked about how the people that were involved in the World Trade Center, that they were just going to keep doing this cycle of killing each other and returning and doing it over and over and over until one of them woke up and broke the cycle. So there's a lot of things that are at play in a soul contract karmically and all those levels. And that's what makes me go into the spiritual quantum world or field.
And a lot of times, the soul can choose to establish soul contracts with certain souls, very frequently with the very same souls that caused these issues in the past. So maybe you've been entangled in past lives, and the soul will choose to have a soul contract with that same soul. So now you come down here on Earth, and the purpose is to resolve that karmic loop so that it doesn't keep repeating itself.
This is just basically saying that one or both of the souls become awake and aware of what they're doing, and they decide to no longer engage in those ways that are destructive of killing each other lifetime after lifetime.
Empowering soul contract is one that has, the basis of it is a resonance of love, okay? This type of soul contract is energetically empowering, meaning that when you come face to face with that person, when you connect with them down here, that resonance of love is going to empower you. It's going to give you more energy. See, it's going to kind of elevate you. That's another word that I like to use. Okay, so this type of soul contract, this is common if you've heard of the terms soulmate or twin flames. These are significant soul connections that have the purpose of elevating you. They are very, very deeply loving connections. The foundation of this connection, the reason that you magnetize each other, you magnetize through the resonance of love.
Please
subscribe.
A lot of times when people are talking about soulmates or twin flames, they are talking about romantic relationships, marriages, or lifelong partners, that sort of thing. But there can be friendships that are magnetized. They're just truly, deeply friends. And it's kind of been known throughout history that, there's just some very strong relationships. And I can think of a few. There was the relationship between the authors C.S. Lewis and Tolkien. Actually, there was a friendship between Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. And for romantic relationships, you really can see the magnetism between Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, the actor. So a soul connection or twin flame like that doesn't just have to be romantic.
But the point here is that the foundation of a positive and empowering soul contract is to elevate you energetically, and it has a foundation of a resonance of love.
So Christina is saying that soul contracts can be agreements that where you'll have a lifelong friendship with this person, or you'll have a soul contract with somebody where you have the interaction of the harming each other or the cycle of that.
That at the end of the day, even when you go through difficulties with an empowering soul connection, even though you go through challenges or difficulties, at the end of the day, this connection elevates you, and it's a connection that is based on the resonance of love. Never forget this. These are two really important things to remember. The connection elevates you energetically, and it's based on a resonance of love.
For me, putting soul contracts aside, these are just really good words to live by, because all we have is right here and right now in this moment. And if you are having interactions with people or friends or loved ones or relationship, and they are not respecting you or your boundaries, or it isn't elevating you or raising your consciousness, then that's a soul contract that you might want to break, or a relationship that you might want to end, or however you define it. It really doesn't matter. It's just about living here and now in this moment the best way you can, and using what spiritual practices help you, because life isn't easy.
The first one is love. We already talked about that. So the basis of this connection is love. But then there are a couple of other things that are important, okay? One of them is mutual respect. Okay, so no matter what happens in the connection, no matter what difficulties, there's always a foundation of mutual respect. And another characteristic that I like talking about is this one, that you always want the best for each other. Okay, so no matter what's going on in the connection, you always want the best for each other. Okay, so here are some characteristics of what it means to be energetically elevating. All right, so that means that this connection, this type of soul contract, in no way removes you of your power or your sovereignty, disempowers you, or pushes you down.
Again, those are good principles to have in any relationship that you have. And one of the ways, here's my plug for you know what, one of the ways to get there is through meditation. Because if you have those boundaries set up and you believe in your life that you deserve to be loved, you deserve to be respected, and you deserve to have interactions with others who are going to lift you up and want nothing but the best for you. And the way you can separate yourself from bad interactions is being clear in your own mind when someone is overstepping your bounds, because your habit mind isn't in the way or making excuses. It's just clear about any given situation. It's not perfect, but it is one way to go to make it a little bit easier in life.
The negative or disempowering soul contract. Okay, so very different from the one above. Now, this soul contract here, the agreement here, the energy that's magnetizing the two of us together is an energy that's based on wounding or karma.
What is the significance of karma? In some instances, it's a profound significance. It also has capacity to light up areas of your own life so that they make sense.
Dr. David Hawkins here is just talking about understanding karma in another way and stepping outside of it and realizing the power we can have by having another understanding. We in the West tend to think of karma as a punishment, but it's more along the lines of a consequence of something that is done. It's just like a result. And everything that comes about can be traced to some origin. So if we took Ronnie O'Neill as an example, since he was the one at the beginning who was sentenced to life imprisonment for killing his ex-girlfriend and daughter, we can trace back to the origin of why he got to where he did. And I do believe he had some extreme trauma. He was also shot, shot with the gun and had surgery. There was just a lot of things that happened to him. And we can take it and look at it as like it was a medical condition. It was the lifetime before. It was a cycle between Ronnie and Kenyatta and Ronivia. The three of them had this soul contract. It just can always be traced back. And once one can step out of the realm of blame and move into the realm of understanding, that can tend to break the cycle as well.
The discernible domain is consequences and not causes. The fastest spiritual advance is to jump beyond the mind's belief in causality. There is no causality anywhere in this domain. There's nothing causing anything. All is becoming that which it is out of its own karmic potentiality and fulfillment.
Souls have agreed to come together to solve things that were left unsolved in you and the other person. Doesn't necessarily have to be that something that's unsolved between you from a past life. It could have been something that was unsolved, a wound that you had with another soul or whatever, but then you came into this life and you just had an agreement to kind of hash things out with this soul. But the point here is that now we're being drawn together through mutual wounding or karma.
My thought is you don't need that specific person in order to heal the karma. You can help heal the karma with another soul. So if you were thinking of it in terms of what Christina is saying, it's like you're in the before life, before you come here, you make these agreements, you talk with these other souls, and you could take a soul and another soul that you're wanting to be able to heal something like, Ronnie and Kenyatta had this horrendous experience together, and they would come together in that time, that place, the heaven realm, the before here realm, and Kenyatta would say, I don't want to do this with you anymore. I need to heal with this other person or other soul or other spirit guide or step outside of this. Because to me, if we have that ability to make the soul contracts, we have that ability to get out of it as well. And we can do it on this realm right here, right now. I believe that everything can be healed. I also believe that that healing has a certain time period that it takes to get there. And we have to go through things in order to get there, to get to that healing.
A lot of times, people initially don't realize that they are in a disempowering soul contract or a karmic connection because initially, in the initial phases of this connection, there's such a strong pull to each other that it mimics love. The initial draw will mimic love, so that a lot of times the person believes and feels almost like they are deeply in love with that other person, or there's a deep love bond between them, okay? And it's only later on, as the connection starts to surface all kinds of painful things, because these soul contracts will surface painful things. And it's only when the shit hits the fan, basically, that people will start to see clearly that that initial draw wasn't exactly what they thought it was. So this contract is coming into your life because it gives you the possibility of healing a wound or completing a karmic cycle.
She's talking here about how sometimes when you meet someone, you can feel that chemical reaction like, oh, there's this attraction or there's something there. And it could be from a past life that you bring it in, and it seems like it's love because there's that energy, that adrenaline and all that involved. And you can find yourself, the proverbial, you can find yourself in a relationship that wasn't healthy, and it was sort of this soul contract kind of thing. And it's important to be aware that that's potentially there. And if you meditate, you might be more able to realize ahead of time that you're stepping into some kind of landmines. So in other words, she's talking about how you can get attracted in this cyclical experience with someone in that you've had a soul contract with before, or you're working out your karmic thing and you're in the thick of it because initially you thought it was love, but it turns out to be one of those disempowering or not so good or tragic soul contracts, like what happened with Ronnie and Kenyatta.
These are three characteristics not based on love, no mutual respect, and it drains you, it pushes you down, it disempowers you. So you can have a karmic connection with a family member, a coworker, you can have a karmic connection with anyone really, but it's very, very common in romantic relationships. Can we break out of a soul contract? So I get this question a lot. People will ask me, they'll say, if my soul signed this contract before coming down here to earth, if my soul established this contract with another soul, then can my human self get out of it? I get this question a lot. And the answer is yes. Yes, you can.
We can get out of almost every situation with intention of wanting to heal or wanting to get into a better life situation. It takes that focus to be able to move forward with our lives, and you can use whatever spiritual practice works the best for you and just mold that into what helps. So you can pray your way out of a soul contract. You can do the steps that Christine is going to say a little further into this video. And you can meditate and call the angels in to help. You can get a counselor to help you work with it. It's the intention. I want to do this. I want to heal these wounds. I want to heal what's happening. And you got half the battle done there then.
It's not about breaking the contract in this circumstance. Really what this is about healing, okay? Once you heal, the contract itself will just dissolve. Once the purpose of a soul contract has been achieved, the connection will naturally dissolve.
She's offering these two ways that a soul contract can end, and one of them is to heal the wounds that came inside from the karmic entanglement. So let's say you're in a relationship with somebody who puts you down and you take that on. And when you get to this place that says, I want to stop this, I want to heal these wounds, I am worthy, then you start to dissolve that contract. And also, the time of a contract can naturally dissolve once the agreements have been reached.
Our conscious awareness that we're in these types of connections and what they are meant to do. Remember, a negative or karmic connection comes into your life to trigger major wounds for you to heal or to complete a karmic cycle that was incomplete from a past life.
Christina says she has 4 steps to ending a soul contract and healing it. And step 1 is you have to admit that you have this negative soul contract going on. Step 2 is the healing of the wounds that came about, either from the past life wounds or the wounds that happened in this current lifetime entanglement. Step 3 is you have to leave the relationship, that you break and end that cycle, because that's the only way that it's going to begin to heal and end, and you can start anew. And step 4 is once you've done those 3 steps, and you have to do them in order, you do a cord cutting ritual where you have this ceremony or a spiritual healing that you do for yourself, where you envision cutting the spiritual ties and cords that you have that to that person. And in these steps, it helps dissolve and end your negative soul contracts that you have in this lifetime.
I terminate this soul contract in all directions of time and release it with love. Now I want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments below, what type of soul contracts do you have operating in your life right now? I want to hear all about it in the comments below.